Welcome, and thank you for joining us this evening. I'm Kathleen Rourke from Candlewick Press, along with our host, Sonja Cherry-Paul, Director of Diversity and Equity at Teachers College Reading and Writing Project. We are very happy and honored to welcome Dee Nichols this evening. As an arts-based organizer, social impact designer, serial entrepreneur, and keynote lecturer, she's mobilized changemakers nationwide to develop creative approaches to the social, civic, and racial justice issues that matter most within communities. The Art of Protest, Creating, Discovering, and Activating Art for Your Revolution, Dee's first book, published by Candlewick Press in November 2021, received multiple starred reviews and was shortlisted for the Goddard Riverside CBC Youth Book Prize for Social Justice. I now turn the conversation over to Sonja and Dee. We invite you to use the comments section to ask questions. Thank you and enjoy the conversation.
So, Dee, when did you begin to see yourself as an artist? Was there a particular experience in elementary or middle school that nurtured this?
Yes, definitely. If you let my family tell it, I've always been an artist. One of the first times of me getting in trouble in life was because I drew doodles all over my grandmother's walls as a toddler. And my family loves to tell that story. But ever since that one experience, they've always nurtured my creativity by buying me like markers and art supplies every holiday, every birthday, and just nurturing it along the way. And so I ended up going to a creative and performing arts high school for visual arts as a teenager, and ended up studying art and communications design in college. And it's just been a lifelong journey.
Who we are personally always influences who we are professionally.
Yeah.
How does your background and experiences, particularly as a younger person, shape the work that you do today? What influences your thinking about activism?
Indeed. Honestly, a lot of my influence is because of experiences that I had in my youth, of being bullied, of being, the only Black person, sometimes only Black queer girl in a space, and being teased for being dark skinned, all of these experiences. And I think earlier on, my instinct was to fight back, like to, say something mean back to someone. And what I really appreciate in life is that I had a lot of mentors and teachers especially, and even family members who nurtured my creativity in order to set me on a path of processing those things that were happening directly to me and around me and in society at large, and finding creative outlets for addressing them. And I think that has always just been my approach to things, whereby I don't dwell necessarily on just the problem, but really fixate and focus on what is a creative way to address this? How can I be a problem solver in the space versus just someone who is, in some cases victimized by the issue?
I think that's so powerful for young people to hear how their lived experiences, the celebratory ones and the painful ones, can powerfully, influence how they show up in the world. Let's talk about your incredible book, The Art of Protest.
Yeah.
I don't think that I've ever, Dee, seen a book like this. It is an art book, an activism book, a how-to book, a history book. It's a right now book. And I'm wondering, while I look across this with you a little bit, can you talk about what exactly is artivism and protest art?
Yes. So I think there is a distinction between the two. Protest art, of course, is art made in protest of societal ills, whether that's trying to fix an issue in our local community and using art as a way to bring attention to that, or even on a larger scale in society, creating posters, apparel, other artworks, exhibitions, etc., in order to express our disdain or advocate for a better solution. With Artivism at large, though, I think it really entails the organizing of people, bringing people together into the process, going beyond the art and thinking creatively about how do we meet each other in space? How do we build community and relationship creatively in order to achieve our collective goals and aspirations?
Mm. And, I'm thinking about how this book will just be so important to so many young people. And some young people are extroverts, right? They're outspoken, and perhaps maybe the ones that educators or adults in their lives identify as people who might be the most interested in activism and artivism. But many students are also more introverted. Yeah. Their voices can be quieter and nonetheless mighty. How does artivism engage all students and empower them to not find their voice, because their voices are not lost, but to use their voices with intention and to advocate in powerful ways? How does Artivism do that?
Yeah, in my opinion, I feel like, of course, everyone has a voice, and our voices just resound differently. Some people, like you said, are more audible. They might be great orators and speakers, and they can lead the chant. Some people are more performative with their voice. They can, set a scene and grab the attention. And some of us are visual. We have visual voices. And I think what the power is within Artivism, because of that, is we speak a different language. And we can start to bring together a lot of those symbols, a lot of those chants, visualize them, and create the scene for what a path towards change looks like. When I think about protests that I've been in, marches that I've been a part of, yes, I remember the chants. I remember some of the people who were there. But what I almost remember most vividly are like the pink hats, are the posters, are the outfits and uniforms that people have worn, the banners that people carry. And so I think that leaving that visual imprint can allow someone, even the most quiet person or the shyest person, or even people who have different types of abilities, be able to shine in a different way and still have their voices in the space.
You write about the 2014 killing of Michael Brown and the uprisings that occurred in response. I wondered if your work in Ferguson was perhaps a catalyst for this book in some way. How did your experiences working with the Ferguson community inform your thinking and creation of the art of protest?
Yeah, you're spot on. That experience of co-organizing Artivist STL, the collective, creating all the works that we made in community together, especially the Mirror Casket project that came from a series of nightmares that I was having on the ground. A lot of that is the impetus or the catalyst for this book. And the story actually is that we created the Mirror Casket, and in 2016, when the Smithsonian Institution was developing their National Museum of African American History and Culture, this casket from the protests was bought and collected for their collections. And in opening the museum, Smithsonian Magazine had various activists across the nation write about new artifacts that were in the collection. And activist Angela Davis wrote an article titled "The Art of Protest" about the Mirror Casket, and profiled me and my comrades, the 7 of us who brought this piece alive in that piece. And then, of course, on a local scale, people were super excited about that. And so I was invited to give a TED Talk, also titled "The Art of Protest." And I gave that talk in, I think, 2018. And in 2019, when I was just like hanging out on campus for a fellowship at Harvard, the publishers reached out and said, "Hey, we've been wanting to have an author write a book about protest art for young people, for young minds, and we saw your TED Talk." And so that ripple effect of having this artwork that came out of a series of nightmares in the midst of protesting, then be manifested on the ground, and then take a life of its own, all the way to Washington, D.C., to the Capitol, for the nation's first Black national Smithsonian Museum. It's an amazing testament of the power of protest art, but also the power of community to really catalyze that type of chain reaction.
Yeah, it sure is. What an incredible honor. Angela Davis
Yeah.
and the National Museum of African American History and Culture to feature your work.
And I got to meet her. That's the wild part. She came to speak in St. Louis in 2017, so a year after, or a few months after that article was published. And I went up to the mic during the Q&A with one of the other artists, and I had the magazine in my hand, and I just asked her a question, and I was shaking, and she invited me and him on stage, and I got to hug her and give her, show her this, this spread in Smithsonian Magazine that she wrote about the work. And that was the most enlivening experience that I ever had in my life. It was very 360.
Yeah. For me, Angela Davis is the walking, living, breathing symbol for anti-racism, for justice. Dee, in addition to the Black Lives Matter movement, you, in the art of protest, you help young readers learn about other powerful movements across history. And I was wondering, did you learn about these movements and artivists in elementary or middle school? And why is it important for young people to learn about social issues, and why should this be happening in school?
Yeah. So I think people discount how brilliant and cognizant young people are of what's going on around them. I know that for myself. I learned and knew of racism very early on. I remember seeing the race riots happening in LA. Just through flipping through television as a kid and wondering what was happening. I was alive when Hurricane Katrina happened. I was around when 9/11 happened, and I think about all of these moments whereby I see it, and no one's telling me why. No one's telling me how to respond or helping me process. And I think Art of Protest and other books like it are that tool, whereby if teachers and parents may not have the language or know how to share with young people what's happening, this is one tool that uses art as that opening conversation. I think so often talking about political issues and social issues and war, all of these challenges, they can become polarizing. They might even be unnerving or distressful. But looking at a work of art and using that as the opening door to dive more deeply, I think that is one approach that in some ways increases curiosity while decreasing perhaps the sense of fear, because you see something that has manifested. And I think instilling within young people a sense of awareness with hope is powerful in helping them to aspire towards positive change, even in the midst of seeing or being a witness to the bad things that are happening across society.
And I think in many classrooms and in some curriculums, certainly there is discussion around some social movements. Certainly, I think it's important for there to be more. But your book, Art of Protest, is incredibly compelling because what I hope educators will take from this is you can't teach about these movements without talking about the reasons why art matters in social movements. And you help educators look at the history of this. So for example, you write about Emory Douglas, and we really can't truly understand the work of the Black Panther Party without recognizing the way he used art to inform and to educate the Black community. Who are some of the artivists whose work informs yours and who young people should study as well?
Yeah, the few that always just come to mind and have influenced me greatly. Some of them are featured in the book. One is Damon Davis. He's actually a collaborator and close friend of mine who's featured in the book. And part of it for him, with him, what inspires me is that the seamless way he is able to transition from protest to humanist and humanist to like future self, and think about like how might we unlock our imaginations to really see ourselves as gods, as better humans, as better forms of self in the future. And I think being able to do that across so many types of media is just mind blowing to me. Ai Weiwei or Ai Weiwei, his way of finding a symbol within a struggle and maximizing that. Whether it's shoes or children's backpacks, those types of visuals that just strike you and you can't get it once you've seen it. I also think about and she may not define herself as a protest artist, but I think she's a protest artist. Kara Walker, especially a lot of her sculptural work and earlier silhouette work of reimagining history and retelling these stories of the antebellum period that we know have haunted us, but have been whitewashed or sanitized away from those true realities. And she just takes it to the extreme to where we have to address the ways that we've learned our history. And so those are a few that come to mind. Of course, there are so many others that I can nerd out about too.
You assert that the work of activism and creation is community for collective healing. Yeah. Yet there are those who argue that the work of artivists is divisive. Have you encountered such criticism in your work with young people? And how do you address resistance? What might you say in response to educators, including art teachers or others, who may resist this work and deem it too political, and therefore not appropriate in classrooms and schools?
Yeah. To the first part of your question, I've been fortunate in the sense that I haven't faced extreme resistance. And a big part of that is in the ways that I bring community along with me. That for me, there's always a collective voice. And I try to be as clear as possible about what we mean when we say what we say, or when we create what we create. And I think bringing the potential naysayers along in the process, it's I'm going to hold your hand while I tell you why this needs to change. Yes, there's resistance in that relationship, but not necessarily in a way whereby things are completely shut down. When it comes to teachers, parents, even children who might be cautious or resistant to engaging with this book, I would invite them to think about the things that they care about the most in their worlds. It might not be the same thing as me. It might not be racial justice. It might be the ducks in their local pond. Like, it might be the ability to walk along street sidewalks without too much like trash in the way. Whatever that cause is, those things that they care about, art is a way to visualize or vocalize what you desire for change and what you envision a better experience or reality being. And so this book, whether you want to engage on the political side of it or not, it is still a tool for helping you harness your voice. And there's something in this book for everyone to learn from using the art. And so there might be some people who might open it and they're like, I just want the activity. Like, let me figure out the step-by-step for making a t-shirt or something. Or they want to know what typography looks like and how to consider color theory. There are those tactical elements of the book that are beneficial even if you don't read about all the amazing artists and stories and young people who are making a difference today.
Yeah. And I really hope that educators in particular will lean into all parts of this book, because students' lives are not inappropriate for classrooms and schools, right? We should not have the expectation that children check parts of their identities at the door before they enter, and instead enter as a fractured version of themselves where their lived experiences are silenced, because we cannot expect them to thrive in any educational space if that is our stance. And as educators, we teach students critical literacy skills to apply as readers of not only the word, but of the world, as theorist Paulo Freire has said. And certainly the purpose of teaching and education should be to raise students' consciousness, to be civically engaged, in order to develop the skills that they'll need to be the change makers of society. You write that protest art has been a visual voice for communities throughout history, and you offer lots of tips that help young people learn the art of protest to become artivists. Are there any tips for educators you might share to help them cultivate educational spaces where students can develop as artivists, whether it's in art class or social studies or English language arts? Do you have any tips for teachers?
Yeah. I mean, one of the most valuable tactics or approaches to learning that has carried throughout my life is to show, teach, never tell. And I think as much as educators can resist telling students what to know and create the forum for critical thinking, for collective consciousness and individual like self-awareness to be fostered, that is an opportunity. And part of that, I think, is in the warm-up. I think different school systems and teachers name it differently, but we used to have like the warm-up bell or something, whereby in the first 10 minutes of class, we had to do some type of warm-up activity. And what does it look like to make that activity be sketching or be some type of visual creation in reflection of something that they've heard in the news or seen around them, in order to just help students continue to open their minds of different ways of processing in thinking. And so that is one that I think about like most readily, but I think there's such a myriad of ways that educators can create those forums for their students so that they are like raising and elevating their own minds, even if it's not in a textbook.
Yeah, I love that. That is such an awesome strategy. And, educators can also, and you suggest this in the Art of Protest, they can study protest art in museums,
Yes.
including online collections, and learn about the various forms of artivism,
Yeah.
such as photographs and newspapers and signs and quilts and symbols. And I think young artists thinking about various visual, performative, and experiential forms of artivism will be incredibly empowering for them, because I think they'll recognize that many of them already are familiar and possibly engage in some of these forms, whether it's music or slam poetry or, being active on social media, but maybe it's never been framed for them in this way before. So I think that will be important because, young people, they have and continue to develop innovative ways to lead the revolution. I would be remiss in asking, what is the form that you typically use? Is there more than one?
Well, these days, a lot of it is like guerrilla art making, in structural. I co-lead a collective called Designers Protest, and many of the outputs or artworks that we're creating right now, they fit into space. We have made 3D like protest signs that become these tactical structures in space. Part of it, because my day job is at YouTube. Part of it's also visual and leading conversations with creators, people who are making content and sharing their stories online, and finding the creative ways to embrace them. And I don't create content myself as much, but with the support of my team, part of it will soon become the content creation as it's inspired by Art of Protest and some of the methodologies and approaches that I write about in the book. And so, more structurally these days, but soon more online.
And what is now and next for you, Dee? Are there any upcoming books or projects that you can give some details about?
Yes, one of the projects that I'm a part of in St. Louis through Monument Lab. So I used to be a Monument Lab fellow in 2020. And now my team and I at the Griot Museum of Black History in St. Louis, we've been funded $100,000 to build experiences and structures in honor of Black women's contributions to civic society in that city. And it's called the Black Her Story Project. And it really raises attention to how Black women are often left like invisibilized when it comes to public monuments and the public history of change across cities. And so we aim to change that. And on the project, I'm one of our lead designers for that effort.
You write, I believe in the voice and collective power of protesters and activists to steer us on this hopeful journey, and that you hope young people identify causes that they care about and that they sharpen their creative muscle to take action to be, as you say, creative warriors.
Yeah.
And in your TED Talk titled The Art of Protest, you say that in your soul, you consider yourself simply a creator. What does it mean to you to be a Black creator?
Yeah. For me, I just thought about Issa Rae, like I'm rooting for everybody Black. But for me, it's to understand that, yes, there are a lot of traumatic experiences, systemic inequities that people like me, our ancestors, our elders have faced in order to exist in this world, in this society. And at the same time, there is so much brilliance. There are so many cultural imprints of an impact that we've had that I want to be able to harness. And so for me to be a Black creator is to embody that creative genius, that creative willpower, and not necessarily restrain myself to any media to say like I'm a Black painter or I'm a Black songstress. Like, no matter the media, no matter the platform, I'm creating. And, as a great mentor of mine said, ABC, always be creating. So that's that for me, of like not being ashamed or apologetic about who I am and how I am and who raised me, but to create more and more because of that.
Thank you, Dee.
Yeah.
It's been a pleasure spending time with you.
Yes, thank you. It's been such a joy to have this conversation. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so much. I hope you all enjoyed the conversation and will use the art of protest in your classrooms and across your curriculum to help students discover the power of words and images to inspire and create change. Please join us in April for a conversation with Charles R. Smith Jr., award-winning children's book author, poet, and photographer. For a full schedule of conversations, please visit blackcreatorseries.candlewick.com.